Welcome to Stories from Sight, the podcast for renovation enthusiasts. I'm Amy Donalik, and together with my co-host Jane Middlehurst, we chat with home renovators about the rollercoaster that is renovation. This week, we sit down with Irene to chat about her personal renovation journey, a renovation of a quirky house in London. We meander through her work as an architect with husband Peter, the difficulties of making decisions, and the joy of creating space together for expanding family life. So welcome to the podcast, Irene. Really great to have you with us. And I wanted to ask if you wanted to kind of explain a little bit about your renovation that you've finished.
Thank you for having me. I feel very honoured. So, we have been living in this house now. It's a little house in Forest Gate. We've been living in it since 2018. We bought it in 2017. And it feels like maybe we've just finished renovating it, and that's when we're planning to move. So yeah, it's been a long process. The most intense part was obviously at the very beginning. We bought it and it needed a huge amount of work. It's a very curious little property because it's an annex to a much larger property that it's connected to. It's in the Woodgrange Conservation Area in Forest Gate, and there's these 4 roads. They all have a large double-fronted house, and then some of them have small little annexes or garages. Some don't have any. But then towards the end of the build period of the estate, we're on the last road that they built, and I think they made some kind of improvements as they went along. They built these annexes, which were like the servant quarters it's a little 2-story property, but it never really had a stair internally connected to the main house at every level. And it was just, I think, originally intended as a kind of ground floor kitchen and place to hang out for the servants. And then upstairs, they would have a bedroom that it connected from the main house. Yeah, so it's quite curious and really, really interesting, really kind of unique. So when we bought the house, it had already been detached from the main house in the 80s. And so there was a stair that was put in that was enormous compared to the proportions of the house. Also in terms of materials, all like very dark and heavy. And, for a tiny property, it just felt really odd. I talk about the stair a lot because it's kind of what makes the house and makes the layout of the house.
I've actually got your stair on my computer open because it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much.
You about that. Did you say that it solves all the kind of layout problems, the fact that you repositioned it?
I mean, this is where, when our friends ask us, how's the renovation going? We would be an hour into what the stair does and doesn't do. So I'm really sorry, and I hope I don't do that. But because it was the magic piece. So obviously we demolished the existing staircase and we redesigned the stair, we relocated it, and it did actually solve a lot of problems. It meant, first of all, that when you walked into the house, you weren't confronted with this enormous stair, but then also you could actually enjoy walking and spending time in the living area because we pushed it back, and therefore the entrance and the living space became much wider and a much nicer experience. And then we also had to, in the process, move the bathroom that was in the middle of the plan downstairs to the middle of the plan upstairs. But it meant that obviously we could then connect all the spaces on the ground floor and see through to the garden as you walked in and create a big open living space, big-ish, because everything, the house is 62 square meters, I think. So it is a very petite house.
Could we go back to when you bought the house? Was it that you saw a project in there and that's what attracted you to it?
Well, a few things, really. We had a really tight budget, really, really tight budget. And we felt incredibly privileged to even be looking to buy a house at the time. We didn't start thinking that we would be able to buy a house at all. We were looking at flats. We were looking in Walthamstow, and I think we'd missed the boat there. And then we remembered that we had some friends in Forest Gate, and it just looked so lovely and so kind of green. So we started our internet search and came across these little houses, and actually just ours and one across the road from us. They were both on the market at the same time. But the one across the road was a little bit more contemporary and it was in better condition, so it was more expensive. So it was both a case of arriving to see it and loving the streets, loving the property, you know, the bones of it, but also being really realistic and realizing that we couldn't really afford anything else. I think especially Peter, my husband, he just saw straight through it and was convinced that this was it. Whereas I was a bit like, oh, but I don't know, a bit across the road. It's kind of more livable and we could live in it already. But I think he was right. The reality was we would have ended up doing everything anyway, because it was only a little bit more livable, but nothing to our taste. Yeah, we just very quickly realized that this could be our little house, and we put an offer and it was accepted, and we were totally in love with it immediately. And it felt all quite magical to suddenly be able to buy a house. And yeah, the project obviously was very exciting. We're both architects, and knowing that we were almost forced in that case to do a project and we had to do it straight away, maybe was also a big part of the attraction.
So how did you go about working on the project together if you're both architects? How did that work?
Well, first of all, Peter and I met at work. We did work together and we loved working together. We actually had fun working. And I'd like to think we were a really good team and got lots done. We were kind of quite efficient, I think, but also just enjoying working together. And we weren't together at the time. It was quite telling that we were getting on so well and that we really clicked and made a good team. And so when it came to doing this project, it almost felt like we were back working together and we were both developing our ideas, but then being able to chat about them and look at things together. It was really nice that we felt really equal approaching it. Designing it was a joy. I've been reflecting a lot about this now that we are embarking on another renovation, but how at the time it felt like making decisions was quite easy. We would both just chat about how we wanted to live in the house. We kind of envisaged our life together, because I should say that we were also planning a wedding. So we were really embarking on a life together in multiple aspects. And yeah, it just felt like we could make decisions fairly simply. And I think we've always been quite similar in our design approach. So again, that helped. So yeah, it just wasn't that hard. And I say that because at the moment it is really hard to make decisions for our current renovation. But I think that's also because it's not to do with just us anymore. We now have 2 kids and a dog. And our kids are really young. Lola will be 3 in July and Louis is 9 months. And, you know, we're getting to know them in terms of personality and what they're going to like. And we don't actually know what it's like to live with children and with teenagers and with young adults. And it's all of the things that we're hoping the new renovation will give us. It will give us this place where we can grow with the house. So it's extremely hard to do that because we have no idea how that's going to go. And we've been like asking loads of friends and they're all like, but you're the architects. but we've never lived with kids or older kids. And I've also never really lived in houses. I'm Spanish and, you know, we live in apartments and they can be generous and they can give you all the things that you need, but it's a very different way of living to living one level. And now with the second renovation that we're embarking on, we don't know the house. We've never lived in it. And we almost don't know what our brief really is. Whereas with this house, it was very simple.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, accommodating young children versus teenagers is a completely different set of needs and requirements, isn't it?
You know,
Yes.
when they're young, it's all about visual connection and being able to get on with other things while you can oversee and make sure
Exactly.
they're okay. And then suddenly it's like, oh, they want to go and find nooks and crannies and disappear and come back. You need that space for congregating, but also everybody being able to escape away.
It's very tricky. I mean, again, I think constraints are a blessing, and we are constrained again by multiple things. They really helped us in this house, and I think for the second renovation, it looks like they would be really helpful as well. Starting with budget, there's a great budget constraint, and therefore we're choosing not to extend, or we demolished the existing extensions that were there. They were in terrible shape and were enormous and very out of proportion with the house anyway. And it's almost like reconnecting to just the original house. Just go back to that, go back to the origin and make the best use of the space that the original house offers. But even then, it's very difficult to approach. In the first renovation, the house has a lot of historic features or original features that were hidden away, like the original black and white checkered Victorian tiles that would have been the kitchen for both houses. And when we bought the house, the bathroom was sitting on top of those tiles. So they were kind of in bad shape, covered up. The bath was on top of them. And so it felt like so rewarding to be able to showcase these features again. And the same with the fireplaces and restoring the windows. Just, it had so much charm. So it was quite an easy brief in that sense too, which was, let's make the most of all these features.
Ooh.
The new house doesn't have any. They're all kind of gone.
I really love that you have quite a big curtain in that space, which obviously you can separate those spaces as well.
Yeah, that was an idea I think we had at the very beginning when, because of all of these sort of ideas to open up the ground floor, open living, I think we're all kind of coming back from open living a little bit. It's great. It gives you a great connection and you can move around the space and be cooking and chatting and all these different things. But sometimes you just don't want to do that. You want to block away the noise, the smells, even the view. You know, we all talk about how beautiful it is to open the front door and connect all the way through to the garden. But you don't necessarily always want that. You might sometimes want to feel really cocooned and cozy, especially in like winter evening. We thought we would open everything up on the ground floor. The house being so small, we wanted it to feel large and generous and airy and bright and happy, like a joyful space. But there had to be a way of creating different rooms within that space and also to close areas off. So it was from the beginning part of our design brief that we would very clearly be able to read the rooms and also be able to close parts of it off, at least when we could. And we designed this curtain that created a kind of relationship with the joinery to the stairs and a bookshelf to the side. And then we hid a curtain track. And the design was there for a long time, but the execution didn't arrive until 4 years into living in the house. Obviously, there's a part of us that wanted things done and finished from the beginning, but equally is really lovely to be kind of looking forward to every edition and really take it in, almost like a new guest that arrives in the house and you're like, oh yeah, this is a nice kind of relationship and what it gives you and doesn't. And the curtain was brilliant. We absolutely loved it. And it was Tom Ellis, who's a local artist and also a joiner, and he's really talented, very artistic. So he kind of got really invested in the project, could see what we were trying to do and had designed, and he built it beautifully. So that was a joy to suddenly see this thing kind of appear. And then the curtain itself was just a sale fabric from John Lewis, a local tailor made our curtain. And then we installed it and it was all amazing, great. We've got the beautiful bookshelf and the curtain track and the curtain and it's there. And then it would take us about 10 minutes to draw the curtain that just wouldn't slide properly. And we did this for months, just like, oh, okay, I'll draw the curtain. And then, 10 minutes later. And because we were so busy at the time, our daughter was born, and I don't know, and you just kind of accept that some things, this was our fault, by the way. Anyway, point is that one night Peter just got some oil in the curtain track, and then it just started like flowing. And we're like, why didn't we try this like months ago? And yeah, we just use it all the time now, just to watch TV and evenings, close it off, or even like, I don't know, when we have guests, or it's great to be able to adjust at home with little moves. Yeah.
Well, it's almost like if you can see the kitchen, you're still connected to
Definitely
things that you have to do at some point. Whereas if you just close it off and you can't see it, it doesn't exist. It's amazing.
Yeah, physical separation really works. Like it really helps your brain calm down a little bit, just not seeing the endless list of things to do.
So I read that this was obviously your first home, your first renovation, and that actually the process really helped you understand what it was like for your clients to go through the design and construction process of, having their homes remade. I just wondered, how did it help you with the clients now?
I mean, that has been the biggest benefit, I think, bearing in mind that obviously we are architects, we run our own business, but we've been trained to do that from university, just kind of like work really hard on the design, test it through all the, thorough design processes and arrive at the best possible solution. We haven't really learned, or we haven't really been put to the test until we go to work on how the other side works. So how our clients will feel and will trust that design process. So there's obviously, like any relationship, a client to architect relationship is all based on trust. I think you have to be able to allow them to build that trust, and they're entrusting you with that process. They're passing it on, and they are huge decisions that have financial implications, long-term implications on how they're going to live in their house. That means like how relationships are going to develop, survive. I mean, they're huge, huge, huge decisions. And it's not just about what is the best kind of design or architectural solution, because it is a very human job that we have as architects. We are basically interpreting all these kind of extremely human desires and ambitions and fears as well, and translating them into spaces. So that isn't just a technical creative exercise, it's a very emotional exercise too. To be put in that position doing a renovation where we had all those fears, we had all that anxiety and that worry and that constant, what if we do this, but what if we do that? And so making decisions is so difficult. It's just extremely difficult from, when you're the client and you're really in it. I'd like to think that we were always kind of aware of that, but the process of doing a renovation has really highlighted that, and has meant that the way we try to approach our projects is very much about trying to listen to our clients as much as possible and giving them a service that makes them feel they are very listened to, and then also make them feel confident that you're the professional.
Just thinking about it from the client's point of view, they get presented with something that they've had no part in processing. So it does take a little bit of time to wrap your head around, well, one, the drawings and what it means in 2D, then just really understanding how that translation of what they've said to space. And I just think that is something that takes patience from the architect to really bring them with you on the journey. I think that's what we hear from quite a lot of homeowners who maybe aren't that happy with their architects because they haven't been taken on that journey with them.
Yes, it's very true. I think going through options and presenting things physically, also in 3D form, in 2D form, we try to kind of, at the very beginning at least of the process, cover so many options that we then can learn which one works best with the clients. And to be honest, also just talking a lot. You have to meet them at various times along the way so they can also communicate what's working best for them. The hardest one to work with, I think, is changing of minds. And it just recently happened to us. So I completely understand that obviously you choose one option or you choose one route. And then at some point, a month into the process, you're like, oh, did we make the right decision? Is this the right layout? And that's the one that I think for clients working with professionals, architects or builders, that's quite hard. And I think we need to spend some time thinking about how we can tackle better, because we all hope that you choose an option and you carry on and you move forward and then the process can continue. But unfortunately, sometimes the process has to go back and it feels like you're wasting time or you're wasting money. And that's a very difficult thing to confront. Yeah, it's just remembering that if you're planning to live there for a long time, you want to get it right. If you have invested all that money into a project, you want to get it right. So almost spending a little bit more might be worth taking the short-term hit to make the long-term work better.
I think time is a very important aspect to the decision-making process, because often when we get clients, by the time that clients have got to the point which they're raring to go, it's usually been brewing in their heads for several years. When they want to press the button, it's like, right, we're going to be on site in 6 months, or we want to be on site even next month. There's a big time pressure once the architect is on board. But actually, just like we're going through this process right now with our own home. And I was just thinking this morning, we've done a design and now we're sitting with it. And we've got the time to kind of just both think about that for several weeks, that it's going round in my head. And as I'm walking around the house, I'm like, oh, and I'll imagine I'm doing this here and I'll be doing this here. And
yes,
you're doing that testing time for yourself. And I guess sometimes in that architectural process, there isn't always the allowance to allow that thinking time.
You need time. You need time to let it sit. You need time to test it. And you need time to doubt. And so that then you come out of the doubt and you're really confident. Like right now, we have, 2 young kids at practice. And sometimes we don't really have any time to think. And with our own renovation, we look at things in plan and we think we can imagine how it's all going to work and what's best for us. And so we make a decision and we're like, yeah, that's definitely, look at it. It's obvious. It's architecturally like the best option. It's so clear. And then the amount of times that at, 3 a.m. after a feed or something to my baby, I'm just lying there going, we made the wrong decision. We make the wrong decision, because suddenly your brain has processed it and it's random and it comes out at completely random times. So we try to build it into the architectural process as well, or timescales, and tell our clients every time we finish a stage, we just say, take your time, think about it. But they are very conscious of their timescales too.
Yeah.
So they might be like, how long do you think, we should take? And we don't know how long it takes for a brain to process a space and make that kind of decision, but we can guide them and say, well, look, if you could make it in 2 weeks or a month, then we could still target, there's dates that you had in mind of obviously Christmas move-in, which is always a big one. And if you don't, then maybe the program would be delayed. And so they're still really pressured, even though we might be trying to tell them to take as much time as possible. There's still an inherent time pressure in the process, which is linked to finances, which is linked to logistics like schools and all these sorts of things that are very difficult to manage if you let the program slip.
I know that you're saying you've got less constraints and this next renovation is going to be harder in that respect for making these decisions. What do you see your process for the first months of your design for this next project?
So for what we're calling the pink house renovation is a tricky one because we bought it in a complete state of disrepair. It had been a squat. There were needles on the floor. I think there'd been growing drugs in there. It was just not a pretty sight, but obviously we could see how it could be an amazing home. But we hadn't really planned to move yet. This house came, we got told that it was being sold off market. And we were very settled in staying in this house for a while. Even with 2 kids and a dog in a tiny space, we thought we could make it work. But really, the last few months really started to highlight that we were definitely going to need more space. And, you know, there was suddenly a bit of a time pressure on leaving this house. And then suddenly one day, it was actually a lovely client of ours that lived on the road of the house that we've now bought, and just texted us and said, I don't know if you're interested, but obviously they knew that we had another kid and they could probably tell that we would need more space at some point. They're selling a house on our road off market, but you need to see it today. So we just kind of went straight there. We had to climb through the window with broken glass, and it was just all like a bit surreal. And immediately we're like, yeah, we want it. We want it. Piles of broken stuff everywhere. And like I said, like syringes on the floor. And we're like, yeah, we love it. We love it. This is just incredible. But we did love it. So anyway, we rushed to really try and make this happen. We had to then sell this house very quickly, move on, buy the other house, but do the work almost in parallel with the houses being sold. And so in answer to your question, the concept design and the detail design are almost all happening on top of each other, which is not ideal. Nothing that we're doing is really ideal right now. We are not following our own thorough process of design with lots of options, lots of models. We're doing what we have time for, and it's no time. And we do things whilst we're pushing the pram. People think that we're just having a lovely stroll on a Sunday, but we're actually having an office meeting and going through an agenda and making some order for tiles or windows. So it's a bit messy. But our strategy is at the moment to just turn it into a livable shell. The new house is by no means going to be a finished product. We can't afford it financially, and we can't afford it in terms of timescales. So we're just going to move in. We actually are going to have a temporary kitchen plumbed in, and it's a kitchen that comes from one of our projects, where we have offered 2 site visits in return for their kitchen that we're going to bin. But it feels like a really good system in many ways, you know, not binning things that are still usable. But there's obviously decisions that we've had to make to be able, you know, whilst we were doing the big heavy duty work and replumbing everything and wiring everything, we've created larger openings for doors to the garden instead of windows and things like that. So we needed to make some detailed design decisions very early on and leave some other decisions that you would make much earlier in the process to much later. So it is all a bit messy. But I guess there will be a really lovely second phase when we're in there, and one day we'll be able to, you know, we'll be dreaming again about how we want to live, how we want it all to look. And obviously we're going there now. We have a vision of how we want it to look, even in kind of fabric terms. I keep finding myself drifting into looking at antiques and vintage pieces of furniture. We have a door there that we rescued from a skip, and we have a vision for it, but we won't be able to execute it for a long time. So yeah, that'll be another phase.
Oh, that was so lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much.